We are live and recording! Yay! Hello, everyone, and a very happy Wednesday. I had to think for a second, like, what day is it? But a very happy Wednesday to everyone. It is my pleasure to get to introduce you to Sarah Zachrich Jeng, who is going to be in conversation with Margarita Montimore. Now, Sarah is in the center with the fabulously color coordinated hair for the beautiful cover of her book, The Other Me. Now, The Other Me, just to give you a little taste, is we have this artistic woman. She is an artist indeed. She has her life, and then her day happens, and then she's in a very different life from the one that she has been living, which that's a little jarring, a little shocking, I think, if it happened to any of us. And then she has to go on a journey of figuring out what is going on. She's married to someone, and there's some suspicious things going on with his activity as well. And a whole just tale ensues from that. And the stakes get higher and higher as the story goes on. But of course, you'll have to read the book to figure out exactly what that means. And she is going to be in conversation, as I said, with Margarita, who is the author of, I want to make sure, is it Una Out of Order?
It's Una Out of Order.
Thank you. I'm so sorry. I should have asked that, but with Una Out of Order. And I am so excited for you guys. It's going to be such a great conversation. Go ahead and pass it off to Margarita, though. If you look to the right-hand side, you will see the general chat section. Hello to everyone commenting. Myself as well as Kelly Ann will be in the chats interacting with y'all during the event. And then also, if you look down below, you'll see where it says ask a question. And that is indeed where you can ask a question. I highly, highly encourage you to take advantage of that. Events are fun because you get to pry the brain of the author and be like, from where did these dark and evil but yet really fascinating and cool plot twists come from? Do tell. So make sure you hit the ask a question button down below and fire away. And then also, most importantly, is if you look down below, right below Sarah, you'll see where it says purchase books. And that you can go and purchase The Other Me, which came out yesterday. So a very big round of applause and a happy book birthday. And also, this is a debut novel, so make sure you go and give it all of the love it deserves. And on that note, I'm going to go ahead and pass it off, and I will see y'all at the end of the event. Bye!
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us. And Sarah, first of all, I want to congratulate you on your debut week. It's such an achievement. It's such an exciting time, and you have written such a good book. I mean, I'm a slow reader. I'm a picky reader, but I completely devoured this story. And there's so much about it that I love that we're gonna dig into. The first thing. I know we got like a little bit of a summary, but if there's anything else, kind of, if you want to give everybody another kind of overview, and also initially, I'd love to know what compelled you to write this book.
Well, thank you so much. That's so nice to hear you say that. So The Other Me, as she said, is about an artist named Kelly who lives in Chicago, and one night, which happens to be her birthday, she's at her friend's opening. And she walks through a door and suddenly finds herself in this whole other life where she didn't go to art school. She married a guy from her high school who in her former life she didn't know very well. So she has memories from both of her lives, both the one in Michigan, her hometown, and in Chicago. So she has to figure out what's going on, why this happened, if it can be reversed, if she wants it to be reversed, basically. So the genesis of it was, I don't remember exactly when I had like the spark of the idea, but it was kind of like the trope kind of came first. And it's like a pretty common trope that I don't really want to name because it's a little bit of a spoiler. But I wanted to kind of tell it from a different point of view. There's always a story that's kind of simplified, guy meets girl, guy wants girl, guy gets girl, right? So it's always told from the guy's point of view, and it's always this kind of romantic story, and we never really get the girl's point of view, whether or not she's into him or not at first. So I wanted to kind of turn it around and look at it from the girl's point of view and what happens to her when this whole story takes place with a fantastical twist to it.
That's so interesting. I never thought about it that way. With like, yeah, you have, it's always so much from, and it's usually the male perspective of, you know, kind of doing the courting and the pursuing, and you don't really, you're so much in that one protagonist's mind that you don't get to see the flip side. And you know, one of the things I loved about this book is that it's a sort of novel where if you're just looking for a like psychological suspense story that is just gonna like grab you from the first chapter and like keep you hooked all the way through, you've got that. And then at the same time, if you want to look deeper and kind of go, like there are all of these layers, not just, you know, in terms of like a plot that, you know, just is so propulsive, but I love the way that you examine things like, you know, growing up and, you know, the different choices that we make in life. Like the fact that it's her 29th birthday, I feel like that was a very deliberate choice. And I'd love to know your thinking around, you know, like why this specific number? Because, you know, why not 30? Why not 25? Why not 35? Like, I'm very curious.
Well, originally it was 30. It was going to be her 30th birthday. And then I started thinking about, you know, the whole Saturn Return thing, which is about, you know, 28, 29, around that age. So I wanted to tie that in. And, you know, Saturn Return in astrology is supposed to be this sort of inflection point in your life where things just can change completely. And I mean, thinking back, that's definitely been true in my own life. So, so yeah, I just 29 was basically Saturn Return, and it's also, you know, 30 is supposed to be this big milestone, but 29 is sort of a milestone in itself because it's your last year of your 20s, so it's kind of your last chance to be something under a real adult, I guess.
Right, and I feel like it's that. Also such a year of reflection. So, because for me, I definitely experienced that at like 29 and 39 so distinctly of, you know, kind of looking at your life. And I don't know what it is about those round numbers that makes us so crazy, but yeah, like that there is this sense of like, okay, you know, am I where I want to be? If not, you know, what are the things that I can at least start to do or can do over the next year. So the other thing too, I think, you know, anything that has to do with alternate timelines, I feel like there's just something so inherently irresistible about it. You know, because we can't glimpse our own, you know, like kind of our own what if situations, and you know, we can only imagine what they would be like, but when you get to kind of live within a story where you see a life kind of branch off into this kind of other, like your title says, yeah, like it's so fascinating. And I'm curious, so this is sort of a two-part question. You know, one, what were kind of the other kind of versions of this book, like, you know, the fact that, you know, she's an artist, were there other versions where maybe she was a writer or she was a musician or anything like that? And, you know, like what were the ways that it evolved? And then I'll ask you the second part after.
Yeah. Well, she was always going to be an artist. I didn't want her to be a musician because I was a musician and that would have been, you know, too similar to me. So I was like, but I want her to be a creative so she can be a visual artist. And then I realized that I didn't really know anything about creating visual art. So I had to research all that. But I definitely wanted her to be something creative, and a painter was something that it just seemed to gel with the story.
And why did you feel like that creative kind of connective tissue was so important to the character?
I did want her to be doing something that the people in her life, like her parents, were.
I'm sorry, you're fading out a little bit.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good. I wanted her to be doing something that, you know, maybe the people in her life didn't necessarily approve of, her parents and so forth. Like they might not think it was that practical. And I wanted her to be doing something creative because I don't know, I just wouldn't have like the emotional resonance if she was an accountant or something and then suddenly she became this, you know, freelance graphic designer. But so and also like creatives tend to, I don't know about other professions, but and I know a lot of people identify with their work, but creatives are kind of super identify with their work to the point where they a lot of the time they don't even expect to be paid. It's just what they do, and they have to like have a day job and do their creative work on the side, and that's just the way it is. But they still identify themselves with that creative work. So I really wanted her to have like this strong identity as an artist and then have that taken away.
That's so funny because that was going to be the other part of the question that I asked you that, you know, it's so interesting how, yeah, like especially whether it's artists, writers, musicians, they, you know, it's like whatever your occupation is, you still, it does become such a strong kind of like resonant part of who you are. And then, so like, I feel like that was such a good choice to immediately kind of, even though she was not, you know, a super successful artist, she was still kind of in the aspiring phase. Like she was there for a friend's art opening on her own birthday. But still, like even it's almost more painful to be robbed of that kind of the possibility of the like, you know, not knowing. And then I was also something you don't see that much in stories like the either or the alternate timelines. I feel like a lot of times you see it explored in terms of either the partner that the character has, or sometimes it's like family versus no family. And but here I thought it was very interesting that it was like either just being on her own and, you know, aspiring creative, and like it was very rooted, or being married. But also what you did that I really liked was the geography, that it was city life versus suburban life. And I'd love to know your thinking kind of in making those choices too, and kind of like what your thinking was with like her in the city versus her in the suburbs.
Yeah, so I mean, you know, obviously if you're going to be a professional artist, you probably will have to live in a city, like if not New York, then a big city somewhere. And that was part of that. And also, you know, being in the city is just kind of the quintessential young person experience when you know, leave home and you're kind of remaking yourself as a person who's different from who you were in high school. Like she goes and does that. And then in her other life, she never really leaves at all. Like she goes to college, but it's kind of a state school, and she comes right back and gets married and settles down. And as far as the places themselves, it was basically just like places that I've spent time. I grew up in Michigan, so the towns they're made up, but they're inspired by places that I've lived or been. And I love Chicago. I spent a lot of time in Chicago. So.
And so it's what I like to call like geographically autobiographical, but how much of Kelly or any of the other characters do you personally identify with, or, you know, like I mean, of course, you know, any author, if they don't put at least a little bit of themselves into pretty much every character they write, like, I mean, that's pretty standard, but yeah, like where do you and Kelly kind of overlap, and where do you differ?
I mean, I like consciously tried to make Kelly as different from myself as possible. Like she's super outgoing, and she's, you know, she, you know, goes up and talks to people, and she does that. And I'm a lot more introverted than she is. Like if there's any character that I identify with, it's probably Eric more than Kelly, because at least the disaffected like teenage version of me. Because I originally wrote like 2 different points of view, and it was kind of Eric's point of view starting when they met and they met in like middle school and going up to the present, and then the point of view Kelly's point of view that's in the novel. And Eric's point of view, like, it was a lot of fun to write because I drew a lot from my own sort of adolescent angst there.
And what was the thinking behind kind of narrowing it down to just Kelly's POV?
Well, for one thing, the book was way too long with 2 points of view. I had a whole lot of stuff that didn't need to be in there. And then, not to give too much away, but a couple of readers said that it, gave Eric's point of view a little bit too much play. So, and I also wanted to create a little bit more mystery about what happens, about how he's involved.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And it does also feel like we're so much in Kelly's head and kind of going through the struggle and turmoil that she's going through. So kind of staying with her for the whole journey feels fluid. But I always love to know kind of like, what are the alternative timelines, and, and I love, like people ask me, like, were there any years that you thought about and left out, like all the behind the scenes, deleted scenes, as writers, I'm sure we have so many of those. And I'd love to know kind of where do you, The Other Me, obviously it's, it might be, I don't know if it's the first novel you've written, or, but, it just in terms of your writing history, where do you normally draw your inspiration? Kind of is there a certain kind of wells that you can always return to? Is it kind of more sporadic and random?
Well, actually, The Other Me was the first original novel that I finished.
Nice.
Ever. Yeah, and I had written before. I had written like when I was a kid, and I'd written nonfiction when I was younger, and then I wrote some fan fiction for a while. So that kind of got me into writing fiction again. And then I started on The Other Me, and it took me like 5 years to write. So I did I wrote basically like 3 novels in one. So wow. Yeah, but as far as inspiration and ideas, I mean, I get them from everywhere. Like I've gotten them from news articles that I've read about technology. I've gotten them from dreams. I mean, I have like, every author has like a whole folder of ideas that they're never going to write, but it's like one nonsense sentence, and I have a million of those. But, but yeah, I mean, I get them from everywhere.
That's awesome. So to get a little bit more personal now, I'm sure that when writing this novel, like you can't help but in the same way for me, like time travel, I'm always asked like, what year would you want to go back to? And, that was always something like, what year would I want to go back to, or like relive in my life? And for you, like, what are some of the forks in the road, like in your life, that you'd be curious to revisit, or like those pivotal points that, you went in one direction instead of another?
I mean, yeah, there are a bunch of them. And some of them are like choices that I made.
Oh, sorry, I'm having a little trouble here.
There are a bunch of them, and some of them are choices that I made, and some of them are just, things that happened that were beyond my control. And I mean, yeah, just like, either staying with a certain person or not staying with a certain person, or, moving, like, because I, moved from Michigan. So I made that choice. And then I ended up staying in Florida for the next 20 whatever years. And yeah, just like, I went to college for 2 years and dropped out of college. So what if I'd probably be a journalist now if I hadn't done that? So I don't know if that would be good or bad. But yeah, I mean, I think everyone has those moments that just, those pivot points that change their lives.
Definitely. And you said you were a musician. I'm sure there's an alternate rock star Sarah out there somewhere that, you may have wondered about once or twice.
I mean, maybe if I had like, just worked harder at it. I don't know if that was ever going to happen though. I mean, it was like a thing that I did with my friends that we had a ton of fun with. I was in like, 3 different bands at once and it was a great time, but I don't know if I had the drive to do that for a living.
Fair enough. My whole thing is like musicians, because I also was very musical and definitely have that like somewhere there's an alternate me that was like the lead singer in a band or whatever. And I don't know how they don't get tired of singing the same songs over and over and over and over. Like, as writers, we write a book, we edit it like 1,000 times, we revise it. But then imagine if like we had to read the entire book like every day in a different city, like we'd lose our minds.
It's cool though. Like it's a really cool thing. Like when you're in a band and you're playing together and it just like gels like that. And I don't know, like I never got tired of that part. That was probably my favorite part is when we were playing and it would
go. Totally. No, I hear you. So something that I also like that I felt like our books talked or touched on was kind of the notion of the choices that we make and kind of what is decided for us versus like what we have control over, what we don't have control over. And I'm curious sort of what your thinking was and like what you were looking to say about, kind of our life choices, free will versus fate, and, just in the construct of this story that you created.
I was interested in how like a single choice can be the root of a whole other branch of your life, basically. So that was a big thing. And also, like I wanted to kind of illustrate how sometimes you don't have agency in your life, and that can really make a difference, whether or not you have that agency, whether you're the protagonist of your own life or someone else is controlling it and trying to tell your story. It's so interesting to me how to trace sort of the progression of events and the choices and the just uncontrollable events that lead to everything happening for a person. And it seems random so much of the time, like, bad things happen to good people, good things happen to bad people. And it's not really a matter of how good a person you are. It's just a matter of how lucky you are a lot of the time.
Yes, very true. And what kind of, in general, are you hoping that readers are going to take away from this book?
I hope that,
just a little louder.
I hope that they'll think about their own lives and, that what led them to where they are now. And also, there's like a big, toxic masculinity piece. And I was kind of thinking about that a lot and thinking about how it doesn't necessarily have to be a big obvious, it can have like a benign appearance. It doesn't have to be like a guy it doesn't have to be like domestic violence or whatever. Like that kind of. So I was thinking a lot about that, and I was looking at how like our circumstances and the people that we hang out with, that we associate with, kind of shape who we are as people, and how like when those circumstances change, how we might change as people, because we do through our lives, and every part of our life is kind of a season of it, and different people go along with those parts of our lives, and sometimes we stay in touch with them and sometimes we let them go along with those parts of ourselves. So I was thinking a lot about that, as far how our circumstances and our choices shape us as people.
That's great. And are you working on anything right now?
So I'm working on my second novel, which it's another speculative suspense novel, and it's about female friendship. It's about 2 women who were best friends in college, and they kind of had a little bit of a toxic friendship, and that friendship ended really badly. And it's about what happens when their lives intersect again.
And is there anything you can hint at with what the speculative edge is? Because I'm already sold, but just me being curious.
It's a lot like,
oh, I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's a lot about how friends tend to resemble each other very closely.
Oh, nice. Okay. Yes, that sounds fantastic. So it looks like we have some questions from some of the participants, and please feel free if anybody else wants to ask a question in the right next to the left of the chat box. So why don't we start with the first one, which I actually also am very curious about. Are there any books, movies, or TV shows that inspired your writing?
Yeah, so probably like Stephen King and Margaret Atwood were my first inspirations. My taste when I was a teenager was like basically the intersection of those two. I read Firestarter and The Handmaid's Tale both multiple times. So that was like the beginning. And I also love a lot of sci-fi. Not so much the hard sci-fi as like the more character-driven stuff. Like I really like Octavia Butler and Ursula Le Guin. Newer. I'm blanking on names, of course. But yeah, I mean, I pretty much read everything. And of course, I loved Russian Doll on Netflix. Like just the whole mood of that show, and just like how you never know what the hell's going on, and you're just trying to figure it out the whole time. But it doesn't matter because it's so much fun to watch. So.
I'm Russian, and people know I love like time loops and things like that. So I had so many people like pinging me. I think it came out like on a Friday, and I had all these people on Saturday being like, "You have to see Russian Doll." I'm like, dude, I watched the whole thing last night in one sitting. Of course I watched this show.
Yeah, like I'm watching it multiple times. But I mean, yeah, like that's kind of my goal, to create stuff where even if people don't, like the ending or whatever, or they don't know what's going on, it's still enjoyable because the journey is enjoyable.
Yeah, and I'm with you like on the stuff that's character driven, and yeah, like I find it so interesting when, these, whether it's something to do with like time or, parallel worlds or, any kind of glitch or thing that is used really more as a tool to explore the way, people's identities can change and are formed, or their relationships, and how, all of that can get like so twisted and complicated. And I find it such a like fresh lens to look at all of that with. And especially I feel like there's this, it's not emerging. I feel like it's been building for years now, but I'm seeing more and more and more books and shows about like, especially women's stories told through this lens. Like usually it's so much more about like, saving the world, or, just like it's big
stakes. Yeah.
It's cataclysmic, but, and I mean, we can go back all the way to like Sliding Doors, that came out, and just like it showed that, no, you can actually tell just a story about people, and using this like really, really inventive and fun like way of exploring their lives.
Yeah, and it seems like there's so much of that like genre bending going on now. Just like Palm Springs is like I haven't watched it yet, but it's like a rom-com with like parallel universe or time.
It's so fun. So. Yes, and there's another one also that's like a romantic comedy. I think it's called something like All the Little Things, and I'm not sure if it's also a loop. It might be, but I mean, pretty much anything that, as soon as somebody says it's remotely like Sliding Doors or Groundhog Day, like I am there, sign me up. So yeah, for sure. So more questions.
That story.
I'm sorry?
There's so many ways to come at that story.
You know, the time loop is the one that, like, that's like my thing that's just like out of my white whale. Like, I'd love to do a time loop, but I mean, but I also thought I'd never in a million years thought I'd do time travel, and you know, wouldn't you know? So someday, I like, it's just finding that really kind of different way of attacking it. So, but it's always in the back of my mind, like, oh, what can I do with a time loop that
one day it'll come to you.
Yes, I'm hoping. It's always going to be lingering. So we've got another question. What scene or section gave you the most joy to write, and which one was the most challenging?
Well, that's a hard question because I haven't read the book in a while. So the scene that never really changed was the one where where Kelly walks into her surprise party. That was always pretty much that, at least the first part of that scene. I visualized it in my head, like almost as soon as I had the idea for the book, and it just kind of like flowed out.
That's like the second chapter, right?
Yeah, like it's one of the early chapters. Yeah, so that I mean, that was probably the one of the easiest. And then the most challenging, I mean, there were a lot of challenges. Probably in the middle, like the whole middle basically was just, it was hard to get the pacing right. The middle is always hard. And,
sagging middle, you gotta watch out. Yeah.
Exactly, especially with the first novel. But yeah, because you have to like keep those breadcrumbs coming, and you can't like get too far into them just, you know, eating dinner every night and talking. So I had to keep coming up with different things for her to discover, and like different like sleuthing for her to do. So but a lot of the settings were really fun for me. Like I really liked coming up with the headquarters for Genie, the startup, because it's like this, you know, glass building that's printed and it's very futuristic. So I just kind of like let my imagination go and took inspiration from like architecture sites and stuff.
Nice.
So all of that was really fun.
That leads me to the very next question from the audience. Other than researching what it takes to be a visual artist and architectural details, was there any other research you did to prepare to write to write this book? And I don't know about you, also, like, do you find you research like pretty much as you go, because you never know? I also don't know how organized you are as a writer. Me, I'm a little more chaotic, but
yeah, so like the whole premise required a certain amount of scientific research. Like it's not really a thing that's physically possible, but I wanted to make sure that I had at least a base in the science so that I could let people suspend their disbelief and have the right terminology and things like that. So I did a lot of research on a couple different scientific branches and technology. And as far, I do, like, usually when I'm writing, I'll do like a block of research to kind of like, it's like a feasibility study almost. Like I'll look at something and be like, oh, how would this work if I were to write a story about it? Like, how would the characters do this? How would it happen? Could it happen? And then once I like figure out if it can, I'll start writing, and then I'll kind of run into a roadblock and be like, oh, I don't know this. I need to know more about this. And then I'll do more research. But a lot of the time, like, plot points come from research. So that can be really helpful. If I'm stuck, I'll just be like, oh, I don't have writer's block. I just need to do more research. So it's kind of like stop, start, stop, start.
And I'm going to segue in something I always love to know from writers is whether you are a plotter, a pantser, or somewhere in the middle, and kind of what was the kind of organizational, like, did you outline the other me, and what was your approach kind of constructing the story?
So I did have an outline, and then I, started writing, and I re-outlined and started writing, and like basically I'll have an outline, and then that outline will change radically in the course of writing. And that's just what the story needs to happen, because I'll just kind of like find things that, the characters tell me or whatever. And I mean, I had to, with the other me, I had to be pretty organized because I had to figure out, like I had to make lists and spreadsheets and of different timelines and what characters knew when. And so I was trying to avoid like any huge plot holes. So I had to be really organized, at least in the last draft. Like I'm not so much in the prior drafts, but yeah, when I was like getting it ready for publication, I had to be like real listy.
And with this, the story you're currently working on, is that also something you outlined entirely ahead of time, and you're kind of as you go, you're tweaking it?
Yeah, I mean that was another one where I had an outline, and then I was like, this doesn't work. It needs a whole new ending. So I, came up with a new ending. And now, like I wrote a draft, and then I kind of like plotted out the draft and figured out that way what would need to be in the second draft and what wouldn't, because there's a lot, like I'm an overwriter. Like my first draft of the second novel was like 130,000 words. It was ridiculous. So yeah. So yeah, I have a lot to get rid of, and I like found so much stuff that I could get rid of. It's great. So yeah, that's how I do that. So I'm like writing that second draft now based on those building blocks that I made, and hopefully it'll be a little more organized. So it's a little easier to write and quicker.
Well, I applaud you for outlining it all, because yeah, I tend to not be. No, because I feel like I need to discover it as I go along. So like at best I can write kind of jacket copies so that I can kind of get excited about the story myself. So, but no, I think I like your approach where, you still give yourself that flexibility to discover things along the way. Cause I feel like that's like one of the joys of writing, is when like the characters in the story take over and sort of like, it really like has its own life.
Yeah, I like that too.
So another question from the audience. Can you talk a bit about the tattoos you gave Kelly in her artist life? Any special meaning or inspiration for them that you can share with us?
I actually didn't specifically like visualize what her tattoos would look like. I don't really visualize my characters that precisely. So her tattoos were kind of the same way. I was like I knew that I'd want her to have like half sleeves on her arms. Just kind of watercolor because she's an artist. And then she has this other tattoo that she got in college. It was like her first tattoo after this, this guy that this one night stand drew on her ankle. So that was just kind of an anecdote from her college, from her art school days that became something permanent. And
I love that too, the way he freaked out about it, even though like, no, you got the wrong idea. I just think it's cool.
Yeah, speaking of toxic masculinity, right?
To be fair, I'd probably be a little for like, if somebody got a tattoo, like a guy that you had like a date with got a tattoo of like a quote that you wrote, like it would be like,
yeah.
Let's put it in perspective there. It's a little much.
Yeah. I mean, he just drew it on her ankle and she's like, oh, that's cool.
I feel like it also does show kind of her more spontaneity, her more spontaneous nature, that she and just the fact that she's willing to take these risks. Whereas once she's with Eric in this kind of other place, it's her life is hemmed in so many ways. And I feel like as the reader, you're trying to figure out like, why and how did she end up in this much more limited version of like the life that she wanted to be, the person that she wanted to be, and kind of her discovery and kind of unsewing herself from this like kind of claustrophobic place, and realizing like
there are like compensations though to that life too. Like she's closer to her family. She has more security, which, that's not nothing, but yeah, it's I kind of wanted it to be like not a totally clear division between this life is good and this life is bad. It was more like, each one has its own sort of pros and cons.
And I really appreciated that it's not like she was going from like this perfect and successful and amazing life as an artist to this perfect marriage to this dreamboat of a guy in a mansion. And, like they both lives had their struggles and like the grit and their imperfections. And, it really was her, deciding like, this is the struggle that I'm going to commit to. And like, this is the struggle that, I want to be invested in. So I like that. Cause one of my little kind of bugaboos is when you have these like protagonists that just, they live in such splendor and like their lives are full of so much perfection that it's nice to see kind of, I think it makes it so much more relatable that, like that she's there for her friends' art opening. Like we've all been in that position, whether or not we're artists, like we know what that feels like. So, you just immediately have something to connect to. So I appreciated that. Another question from we still have time for some additional ones if anybody else wants to chime in. But here's the next one. From the first spark of an idea to the end result, were there any big changes that happened along the way in the story's direction or how it ended?
So many changes. Like when I originally started writing, I didn't know what the mechanism would be at all for the big explanation that happens. I didn't know if it would be technology or like magic or what, or if there would be an explanation, because some stories like that just don't bother to explain it. So that changed. Yeah, exactly. And that works really well, especially in Unata Order, but in a lot of other books too. Like I'm thinking of like Kindred by Octavia Butler, and there's never really like an explanation for that. But so that changed. That kind of became more clear. And, the whole middle, there was like subplots that got thrown away. The ending changed completely. Basically everything changed except the beginning.
And that actually segues very well also into the final audience question. What was the most challenging part about writing two parallel worlds and how they interacted with one another? I feel like everything would be challenging about that.
And definitely keeping track of like the ripple effects and trying to come up with ways, like sort of tangential things that would be different, and why those things might be different. Like the thing with Kelly's brother having a kid in her second life. Like I had a whole explanation for that, but I, obviously didn't want to like get too far into it. And some things were just kind of like, oh, it's chaos. It's another universe. But like keeping track of all those changes, keeping track of, the timelines and what characters were aware of at any given time. Because several different characters had involvement. So I had like a lot of lists and spreadsheets and things to keep track of those, and diagrams. I made like this really ugly diagram.
I was going to ask, like, was everything contained, on the page and on spreadsheets, or because like I have a crazy wall that I actually made for my current book, and I've done the wall of Post-its before. Oh, for sure. 2 colored strings, like not just the one, 2 colors. Yes. So was the diagram like something you just like drew to have that like as a visual? Nice.
I need to have a crazy wall. I have this whole wall that I could just use.
Life goals. Let me tell you, it was for me. I thought I was going to use it to help me plot, and it actually helped me. Just something about the process of finding the right photos and arranging everything and getting the dates connected. It actually helped me develop the story too. So, I mean, I think if you're ever stuck or you need, I think. Crazy walls for every writer and any creative person, just find a wall and go crazy on it. Yes. Let me see if we've got any more. I think Oh no, we do. We've got more. Which secondary character was your favorite to write? Did they have a backstory that wasn't able to make it into the book that you really liked or would want to explore?
Well, I enjoyed writing all of them. I really liked writing Doris the neighbor because she was just a lot of fun. I liked writing Linnea because she's kind of like the straight person or like the straight woman to Kelly's. Like she's just kind of like she's the one who believes her because she, there's plot reasons for that, but eventually. So I mean, I always like the friendship dynamic too. So I enjoyed writing like Linnea and also her friend, Kelly's friend, Katie. I really like writing characters that have kind of bitchiness to them. So yeah, Kelly's mom, Katie, Doris, like all of those characters I really enjoyed.
What about the, and I'm sorry, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, the neighbor that she goes jogging with?
Yeah.
Was there, what's his name?
Adam, yeah.
Yeah. Was there more Adam in other?
There was.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a whole subplot involving him that got thrown out. Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
But yeah, I mean, he is interesting because he has a whole thing behind him too. But you'll have to find it.
And I know it's like I don't want to be too spoilery because I found that interesting. And so I'm curious. Hold on, I think we got another question. One thing I would love to know is just any recent books that you've read. We've gotten into your history. And by the way, fellow Margaret Atwood, like she's the one who sort of put me on the map as a writer of like, this is what is possible in fiction. But in terms of like recent stuff that you've read, anything you'd like to share, recommend? My TBR is infinite and I am still always looking to add to it.
Yeah, I mean, same. So I recently read, there's a book that came out the same day as mine by Courtney Ellis called At Summer's End. And it's a historical, it's like post World War I. And it has this sort of, it's very atmospheric. It's set in England. Another artist goes to paint at this stately home and she becomes kind of intrigued and enmeshed by the family that lives there. There's like an earl that was injured and it's all mysterious and atmospheric and romantic. And I really loved that book. The writing was great. And I'm currently reading Vera Kurian. It's called Never Saw Me Coming. And that's coming out, I think, in September. But it's interesting because it's about a psychopath, which is just so intriguing to me. It's like a teenage girl psychopath who gets like a full ride to college to be in this study about psychopaths. And she has her whole agenda, obviously. But so that's really good so far. It's pulling me right in. Yeah.
Who's the author? That sounds like something I definitely need to check out.
Vera Kurian.
Okay. And is it also a debut author?
She's a debut, yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, it's so great how like whatever debut year you're in, my debut year was 2020, and like you just connect with all of these fantastic writers, and then you get to see like how many of them, like it's very inspiring, end up like on all of these like best of lists and chosen for like the major book clubs. And because I think it's fantastic how much like independent booksellers and librarians and the media even like support debut authors. So it's great to just see everybody kind of like all these people rising up, and it's awesome.
Yeah, like connecting with other authors has been such a great part of my debut year. Like I've absolutely loved it.
Yeah, and it just also psychologically too. It's like even sometimes I feel like sometimes people forget that like happy events are so stressful, and having like support and it's like, yes, you have sometimes even when like your biggest dreams come true, it's still really, really stressful and draining, and you have these like different things that come up and issues that you need to deal with. And, you know, so having
understands.
What's that?
They understand what you're going through.
Yes, it's fantastic. So another question we got from the audience members, if you could give Kelly one piece of advice, what would it be?
Oh gosh, at what point in the story? God, oh man, I don't know. Don't take out too many student loans.
What's a good piece of advice for everybody?
Yeah, because I don't want to like give any spoilers. Because I mean, obviously, if you've read the book, you know what advice I would give her. But
sure.
I guess, yeah, just like, you know, be true to yourself.
That works. So I think those are all the questions. Anybody have any final questions before we wrap things up? I think that's everything. So
I think that is, but lots of good questions. So thank you everyone for asking those. And I want to thank you very, very, very much to Sarah and Margarita. And Sarah, thank you for celebrating on your, it's close enough to the book birthday. So post-book birthday. So thank you.
For sure.
Exactly. Birthday week. I feel like these days now, when it's your birthday, you get to have like a whole birthday month. So I think a book should, right? You at least get like a birthday week. And I want to thank you so much to everyone who joined us for all of your fun comments, as well as for all of your questions. And I highly encourage that you go and check out The Other Me, because it is just, it's so good. It's just an awesome book, guys. So, and it's a beautiful book. Exactly. All of the Vanna White pointing and whatnot. And so the purchase book button will be down below for you. And thank you all so much for joining us. And we will see you next time.
Thank you. Bye everybody.
Everyone.